This is my Ladies' Day purse, and as you can see, it's in a metal frame. It's a glue-in frame, which is a really simple way of making the purse, but I'm going to show you in this video how you can design the shape of the bag or the purse that you want. So the first thing you're going to need is your metal frame. This can be any size that you like. Do make sure it's a glue-in one. The glue-in one doesn't have the holes around it. The ones with the holes in are for sewing in. For this one, we're looking at glue-in. You're going to need a piece of paper or card to make your template from, and you'll need a pen and a ruler. So what we're going to do first of all is to draw around the top of the frame, and this works no matter what size or what shape your frame is. This just happens to be an 8-inch rectangular frame. So starting at the hinge all the way around the top and back down to the second hinge again, like so. And then I can fill in the gaps by hand like that. So that's a rough outline of where my pattern's going to be. What I'll need to do next is to add a little bit of a width to the top of the bag. So I'm going to take a line from that curved corner to about 1 inch from the side here, just in a straight line. And imagine that the frame at the side here has pivoted on the corner and swung around. So that's where I'm going to finish. So I've created an arc at the side. So don't come straight out at a right angle. You need to go around at an arc. I'm not going to do the other side. I'm going to fold this in half and cut it out so that it's symmetrical in just a second. But now I can decide on the shape of my bag. So do you want a bag that's going to be quite square? Would you like a long or round bag? Are you going to put some darts in the bottom to give it a little bit of a rounder shape, like a belly shape to it? Or are you just going to keep it simple? I'm going to take the line on my bag and make a slight curve and come around to the bottom. So my Ladies' Day purse was square. This one, I'm going to make it slightly round. Okay, now to make sure that this is symmetrical, I'm going to measure the halfway mark along the top of my pattern. So that actually measures from edge to edge 7.5 inches. So I need a 3 3/4 line here. Then I'm going to fold this in half and just cut around my shape. So the first time you've done this, it may be a good idea to actually make it up in calico or scrap fabric first of all, just to make sure you get it right before you commit to cutting any kind of expensive fabric. There's my pattern finished. So I've now cut out my fabric pieces. So I've taken 2 outer pieces, and I'm using quite a heavy weight of cotton for this one, the kind of cotton that you'd use for upholstery or curtains maybe, so slightly thicker than craft cotton. But I've still put some fusible fleece on the back of there. And then I've got 2 lining pieces, which are just cotton. The fusible fleece is going to give my bag a little bit of firmness and substance. If your fabric is very heavy, if you're using a thick denim or something like that, you probably won't need any stabiliser on the back. The best way to figure out whether you do or not is to simply pick up your fabric. That's how your fabric is going to drape. So if I were to make a bag purely from lining fabric, it's going to be very floppy and very fine. So if I'm using a cotton, then I would need some kind of stabiliser or foam behind there, interfacing, all the same kind of thing. With your interfacing, if you go into a store, that's probably the best way to buy it, and again pick it up and see how it drapes. That's how your bag's going to drape. I like a fusible fleece because it's soft enough so that it's still pliable, it's easy to sew through, but it does give enough firmness for a purse like this for me. So let me take the 2 lining pieces, and remember where I made this swing out shape on the side here, for want of a better expression. I need to mark here on the lining pieces, and I'm only marking on the lining pieces because on the back of the outer pieces I've got fusible fleece, a little bit more difficult to mark. So let's take the wrong side of my linings, place my pattern over the top, Move it slightly to one side, and I'm just going to mark here, flip the pattern over and do the same on the opposite side. Then I'll need to do the same on the other piece of lining as well. So again, let's take, mark it, oops, line that up at the top, one mark here and one mark on this side. And that's going to depict the size of the opening at the top of the purse. Now the next thing to do is to take one of the outer pieces, one of the lining pieces, and put those right sides together so the printed sides are together. And we're going to sew, I'll just put a couple of pins in here so that the fabric doesn't shift as I'm sewing. And then I'm just going to sew around the top on both pieces from that line all the way around here and back down to this line. And the same on this piece. So again, just a couple of pins in here. And then we'll sew. So I'm using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So if you have a lock stitch, use it here. If not, just put a couple of stitches backwards before you sew forwards, and then very carefully sew all the way around the edge. And again, when I come up to that second line, back stitch or lock stitch, just to hold those in place. There we go. Now normally if you're sewing around a curve, you'll trim into that curve, but I'm not going to on this piece because I want the bulk of the fabric. This is the area that's going to go inside the frame, so if the fabric's quite bulky, there's going to be more purchase to hold that fabric in there. Now we're going to glue as well, but if we can force the fabric into the frame, it's more likely to stay in there. So again, just take this around the curve, back down to the second line, back stitch, and we're done on this part. Now we're going to open out the two pieces and sew the fabrics right sides together. So let's do the outer section first of all. So move the lining out of the way, a couple of pins to hold it together, trim off my loose threads. And now we're going to sew from the end of the stitch line that I've just finished around the top all the way around the bottom and stop at that same stitch line on the opposite side. Okay, just coming back up to that same stitch line. So there should be like a cross of fabric here where all the pieces line up. So stop, take your work out, and then we're going to fold over this section and this one. So I've still got that same point that I'm starting with here, and then I'm going to sew around the lining. But this time I need to leave a gap in the bottom of the lining so I can turn the whole thing the right way through. So let's line up those edges, stitches backwards, and around we go. So I'm going to stop here, go backwards a few stitches. Let's move along so I've got a gap of around about 4 or 5 inches, and then carry on sewing around the second side until I meet that same point again. So just making sure that my flap's moved out of the way and I can see exactly where I need to stop here. And again, just a few stitches backwards. So let's turn this the right side out. You can trim around these curves if you wish, if your fabric is very bulky. Let's push this through. That's fine. See how those points all meet perfectly? And then you would open out the hole in the lining, pull both edges together and then sew across there. But I want to move on to show you how to actually put this into the frame. So I'll do that later. So let's pull out the edge of the fabric here. And I'm just going to finger crease this, but now would be a good time to actually take this to the iron and press that just so that that seam is right on the edge. So now let's put the frame on. What I find easier, and this is quite time consuming but it's worth it, is to mark the centre point of the top of the flap here. So 3 1/4 inches is my centre, and the same on this side. And then I know that my frame's going to sit centrally because when I put the frame in, it's going to sit with that mark right underneath the middle of the clasp here. So now let's open up the clasp. Whoops. I'm going to use some wet glue. I'm going to drizzle the glue inside half of the frame. So just take it half at a time, and then you can really take your time. So not too heavily, and try not to get glue on the outside of the frame. If you do, leave it to dry, and for the most part it'll just peel off again. Okay, so I'm drizzling that all the way around to the edge, and then I'm just going to leave it for about a minute until it's really tacky. Then we'll put the fabric in. So now we're going to push the fabric inside the frame. This is where tweezers come in handy, and take your time with this. So my mark's in the centre here. You do have a little bit of wiggle time, and then literally push that fabric inside the frame as far as it'll go. See, this is what I mean about having the extra wadding in there, or the extra fabric in the seam without trimming it back, because the firmer you can push this in, the more likely it is to stay in there. So just keep going with this. Make sure that the inside's pushed in as well, so the lining isn't being pushed out of the way. Remember, I've just gone halfway around one half of the frame at the moment. Just checking that it's all sitting centrally, like so. Then I'm going to leave that to dry. Do the same with the second half, leave that to dry, turn it over, do the same on the other side, leaving it to dry in between. When I say leaving to dry, when you're using strong fabric glue like this, you're probably only talking about 5–10 minutes maximum, so the whole thing could be finished within an hour, but it's worth the wait because then you're going to get that really professional finish. So I'm going to wait 5 minutes, I'm going to carry on, and then we'll come back and I'll show you when it's finished. So this is my original Ladies' Day purse from the book, and this is the one that I've just made. So although it's the same method of making it, making a pattern is it's so much fun, because when you're making your own pattern, you're basically designing your own purse in any size or shape that you like. So you can see this one is larger and it's rounder. This one is more square, so it gives almost a version of a triangular shape to the purse. So experiment, have fun and become your own bag designer.